The crisp morning air carried the faint hum of an approaching storm. Jack Harper sat on the porch of his weathered cabin, coffee steaming in his hand. His loyal dog, Duke, rested at his feet, one ear twitching in the silence. Out here in the middle of Kansas, life was simple. Peaceful. Or so it had been, right up until the sky split open. A flash of blue streaked across the horizon, trailing fire like a meteorite gone rogue. Jack squinted, setting his coffee down on the creaking wooden table. The object roared louder as it descended, slamming into the cornfield a few hundred yards away. The ground trembled, and a deafening boom shattered the tranquility. "What in the hell?" Jack muttered, grabbing his binoculars. Through the smoke, he could see it wasn't any ordinary crash. Metallic shapes emerged from the wreckage, sleek, silver-clad figures that moved with unnerving precision. Duke growled low, ears pinned back. Jack felt the same chill crawl up his spine. His military instincts, long buried under years of solitude, roared to life. He muttered to himself, "This ain't no weather balloon." Jack strode into the cabin, his steps purposeful. Dust swirled as he opened a long-sealed chest, revealing his well-maintained shotgun, an assortment of shells, and a combat knife. His fingers brushed the worn grooves of the stock as memories of distant battlefields flooded back. He grabbed a few tools and a radio receiver he'd cobbled together from spare parts. If this was an invasion, someone needed to know. Outside, Duke barked sharply, dragging Jack's focus back to the field. A trio of alien soldiers advanced, their strange weapons gleaming under the sunlight. Jack racked the shotgun with a satisfying chick-chick. "Let's see if you bastards bleed," he muttered. Jack knelt behind a fallen tree, steadying his aim. He fired, the blast echoing across the field. The lead alien's chest plate shattered, sending it sprawling. The others hesitated for a moment before returning fire, blue bolts scorching the air above him. "Damn fancy toys," Jack grunted, rolling to new cover. He fired again, this time taking out one of their weapons. The remaining soldier advanced, undeterred, but Jack was already moving. He flanked it, closing the distance with a practiced stealth. "Welcome to Earth," he growled, pumping a shell into the creature's exposed neck. It crumpled lifeless. Breathing heavily, Jack wiped sweat from his brow. He examined one of the fallen. Its alien features a mix of biomechanical precision and flesh. Its weapon pulsed faintly, almost organic in design. "Haven't seen tech like this before," he muttered, his curiosity battling his instincts to destroy it. Before he could decide, a sharp hiss erupted nearby. Jack turned to see another pod landing. The metallic capsule split open, and more soldiers poured out, these larger and more heavily armed. "Duke, inside!" he barked. The dog bolted for the cabin. Jack followed, slamming the door shut behind him. He grabbed his radio, flipping switches. The old device crackled to life, faint voices overlapping. "This is Jack Harper," he said, his voice firm. "Got alien troops in Kansas, near my coordinates. Any friendly ears out there?" The response was garbled, but a single phrase cut through. "Hold your position. Reinforcements en route." "Great," Jack muttered, peeking through a crack in the window. The aliens were advancing on his position, their movements methodical. He glanced at his small stash of supplies. "Reinforcements better not take their sweet time." The cabin trembled as the first plasma bolt struck, scorching the outer wall. Jack returned fire, aiming for weak points he'd observed earlier. 2 more fell, but the rest pressed on, adapting to his tactics. Jack reached into a drawer, pulling out a bundle of makeshift explosives. "You wanted a fight," he said, attaching one to a length of fishing line. "You got one." Duke barked again, drawing Jack's attention to the back door. More aliens were circling around. Jack cursed under his breath. He set the trap and retreated upstairs, barricading the door behind him. From the second-story window, he had a clear view of the advancing troops. He lined up his shot and fired, each blast precise and deliberate. When one of the aliens tripped his explosive, the resulting chaos gave Jack a brief respite. His radio crackled again. "Harper, this is Captain Reynolds. We're deploying forces, but it'll take time. What's your status? Pinned down, Jack replied. But still kicking. You folks better hurry, or there won't be much left of this place. We'll get there. Hold tight. The line went dead, and Jack exhaled sharply. The aliens were regrouping, their leader barking orders in a guttural language. Jack's mind raced. He couldn't hold them off forever, but he could make it costly for them. He spotted a silo in the distance, one he knew was filled with old fertilizer. A dangerous plan formed in his mind. If I can lure them close enough, he muttered. Grabbing what remained of his explosives, Jack made his way out through a hidden hatch beneath the cabin. Duke followed silently, sticking close to his side. The pair moved through the tall grass, every step measured. The aliens, focused on the cabin, didn't notice as Jack circled around. He reached the silo and set his charges, his hands steady despite the stakes. Backtracking, he took up a position where he could see the aliens clearly. He fired a single shot into the air, drawing their attention. Over here, you Tinkin rejects! They turned, their leader barking an order. The group advanced, weapons at the ready. Jack waited until they were clustered near the silo before triggering the explosives. The resulting blast lit up the field, a fiery plume that sent debris and alien bodies flying. Jack shielded his face from the heat, a grim smile tugging at his lips. As the dust settled, a lone figure emerged from the wreckage, the leader, battered but alive. Jack leveled his shotgun. You should have stayed in space, he said, pulling the trigger. The alien collapsed, its weapon clattering to the ground. Jack stood there for a moment, breathing heavily. Duke nudged his leg, and Jack gave the dog a reassuring pat. The radio crackled once more. Harper, we're closing in on your location. Hang tight. Jack looked at the smoldering battlefield, his resolve hardening. Take your time, he muttered. I'll keep the welcome party busy. He reloaded his shotgun, ready for the next wave. The smoke from the silo explosion had barely cleared when Jack Harper heard the distant thrum of approaching vehicles. A convoy of battered but operational military trucks rolled into view, dust billowing in their wake. Jack lowered his shotgun as the lead truck stopped and a weathered figure climbed out. Captain Reynolds? Jack asked, squinting through the haze. That's me, the man replied, extending a hand. His uniform was scorched, his face lined with stress. Heard you've been making one hell of a stand. Jack shook his hand firmly. Didn't have much choice. They came knocking, and I answered. Reynolds chuckled grimly. Well, you bought us time, and we'll need it. The aliens are deploying all over. This isn't an isolated incident, it's a full-blown invasion. Behind him, soldiers began unloading supplies and setting up makeshift defenses. Jack watched as they erected barriers and mounted salvage turrets. Among them, a young woman in combat gear approached, her sharp eyes scanning the perimeter. Lieutenant Diaz, she introduced herself, her voice clipped but not unkind. I'll be coordinating ground ops. Captain says you're something of a local hero. Just an old guy with a shotgun, Jack replied. But I'll take the compliment. Diaz smirked faintly. Good. We need someone who knows the terrain and can think on their feet. You up for more? Jack's lips pressed into a thin line. Long as they keep coming, I'll keep fighting. Hours later, Jack found himself crouched in a cornfield alongside Reynolds and Diaz, studying a holographic map projected from a salvaged alien device. The Empire had established a relay station a few miles north, its signal coordinating troop movements across the region. We take that out, we cripple their local comms, Diaz said, tracing a finger over the map. But it's heavily fortified. A frontal assault would be suicide. Then we don't go in front, Jack said. He tapped a spot on the map. There's an old irrigation tunnel that runs under this ridge. Should lead us close enough to plant charges without being seen. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. You sure it's still accessible? Used it to smuggle moonshine back in the day, Jack said with a wry grin. Unless the aliens learn to flood it, we're good. Diaz nodded. It's a risk, but it's the best shot we've got. Let's move. As night fell, the team advanced through the tunnel, their steps echoing softly in the damp darkness. Jack led the way, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. The air was thick, the smell of stagnant water lingering. "You ever get tired of this kind of work?" Diaz asked quietly, her voice carrying just enough to reach him. "Never thought I'd be back at it," Jack admitted. "But when push comes to shove, you do what you've got to." She nodded, though he couldn't see it. "Fair enough." The tunnel eventually opened into a drainage ditch near the relay station. Jack peeked over the edge, his sharp eyes scanning the compound. Tall spires of alien metal gleamed under harsh blue lights, and squads of soldiers patrolled in tight formations. "Looks like a fortress," Reynolds muttered. "Fortresses have weaknesses," Jack said, motioning to a small generator near the base of one spire. "Take that out, and we can overload their defenses." Diaz handed him a pack of charges. "You seem to know your way around explosives. Think you can handle it?" Jack smirked. "Just like old times." The operation unfolded with clockwork precision. Jack moved like a ghost, planting charges on the generator while the others provided covering fire from the ditch. The alien guards reacted quickly, their sharp cries cutting through the night as they returned fire. "Harper, you're cutting it close," Diaz shouted over the radio. "Almost there," Jack called back, setting the final charge. As he activated the timer, an alien soldier spotted him, raising its weapon. Jack dove just in time, rolling behind a support beam as plasma bolts seared the air above him. He returned fire, his shotgun bucking in his hands. The alien dropped, and Jack bolted back toward the ditch. "Go! Go!" he yelled as the timer ticked down. The team retreated, the ground shaking beneath their feet as the charges detonated. A brilliant explosion lit up the night, tearing through the relay station. Sparks rained down, and the spires collapsed in a cascade of twisted metal. "Direct hit!" Reynolds shouted, a rare grin breaking through his usual grim expression. Diaz clapped Jack on the back. "Not bad for an old guy." Jack chuckled, wiping soot from his face. "Told you I still had it." The victory was short-lived. As the team regrouped at the convoy, reports came in over the radio. More alien reinforcements were landing across the region. The destruction of the relay station had disrupted their communications, but it hadn't stopped their advance. "We've stirred up the hornet's nest," Diaz said grimly. "Good," Jack replied. "Means they're scared." Reynolds nodded. "Still, we're gonna need more than guts and luck to win this war. We need allies, better weapons, something to even the playing field." Jack thought for a moment. "There's a place nearby, old military depot. Might still have some gear left if the scavengers haven't cleaned it out." Diaz looked at him sharply. "You think it's worth the risk?" "Don't have much choice," Jack said. "Unless you've got a better idea." She sighed. "Let's gear up and move out. The night's not over yet." As the convoy rolled toward the depot, Jack leaned against the side of the truck, reloading his shotgun. Duke sat beside him, his ears twitching at every sound. "You've got a knack for this," Diaz said, sitting across from him. Jack shrugged. "Spent half my life fighting wars. Guess I just fell back into it." "You think we can win?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Jack looked out at the dark horizon. "Don't know. But if they think Earth's gonna roll over, they've got another thing coming." The truck hit a bump, jolting them both. Diaz smirked faintly. "Guess I'll stick with you for now, old man." Jack gave her a tired grin. "Just don't slow me down, Lieutenant." As they approached the depot, the team prepared for whatever came next. The war was far from over, but for the first time, Jack felt a glimmer of hope. The convoy pulled up to the outskirts of the old military depot just before dawn. Rusting fences and collapsing watchtowers loomed against the pale light, a testament to years of abandonment. Jack Harper climbed out of the truck, his shotgun slung over his shoulder. He scanned the surroundings, his instincts prickling. "It's quiet," Diaz murmured, stepping up beside him. "Too quiet," Jack replied. "Something doesn't feel right." Captain Reynolds approached, his rifle at the ready. Harper, you sure about this place? If the aliens got here first. Jack shook his head. If they did, we'd see scorch marks and bodies. This isn't their style. But that doesn't mean we're alone. Reynolds nodded, motioning for the team to fan out. Keep it tight, folks. Eyes open. The group moved cautiously through the depot's gates. Weeds pushed up through cracked asphalt, and the air carried the musty scent of decay. Jack led the way, his gaze sharp as he guided them toward the main warehouse. Place was supposed to be mothballed after the Cold War, he said, keeping his voice low. But back in the day, they stocked everything from missiles to experimental tech. If we're lucky, some of it's still here. Diaz snorted softly. When's the last time you were lucky? Jack smirked. About 10 minutes before I met you. She rolled her eyes but didn't reply. Inside the warehouse, the team spread out, flashlights slicing through the gloom. Rows of rusting shelves stretched into the shadows, laden with crates stamped with faded military insignias. Looks like the scavengers didn't get everything, Reynolds said, prying open a nearby crate. Inside were neatly packed cases of ammunition. Diaz lifted another lid, revealing a stash of disassembled drones. These might still work if we can get the parts together. Jack stopped at a reinforced door at the far end of the building. Its keypad was caked with dust, but the locking mechanism appeared intact. This looks promising, he said, waving the others over. Reynolds examined the door. Probably leads to a secure vault. Think you can open it? Jack pulled a multi-tool from his pocket and started working on the panel. Give me a minute. As he fiddled with the wiring, Diaz kept watch, her weapon trained on the shadows. This place is giving me the creeps, she muttered. You and me both, Jack replied, his focus on the task. After a few tense moments, there was a faint click, and the door creaked open. The group stepped into a smaller room, its walls lined with cabinets and equipment racks. At the center stood a cylindrical device, its surface smooth and polished, a stark contrast to the decay around it. What the hell is that? Reynolds asked, his voice hushed. Diaz approached cautiously, her flashlight revealing faint symbols etched into the metal. Looks alien, she said, her tone uneasy. Jack frowned. It's not. I've seen something like this before back in the service. Top secret project, some kind of energy weapon. Reynolds whistled low. If it still works, it could turn the tide. Diaz examined a nearby terminal. The power source is intact, but it's running on fumes. We need to find a compatible core to activate it. Jack rubbed his chin, his mind racing. There's a nuclear plant about 20 miles south. If we can salvage something from there. A sharp clang echoed through the warehouse, cutting him off. The team froze, their weapons raised. Movement, Diaz whispered, pointing toward the entrance. The sound grew louder, footsteps, heavy and deliberate. A shadow passed through the doorway, and then another. Jack's heart sank as a squad of alien soldiers filed in, their weapons drawn. Ambush! Reynolds barked, diving behind a crate. The room erupted into chaos as plasma bolts scorched the air. Jack fired his shotgun, the recoil jolting his shoulder. One alien fell, but the others pressed forward, their movements coordinated and relentless. Diaz, get that thing out of here! Reynolds shouted, returning fire. Diaz hesitated, then grabbed the cylindrical device, grunting under its weight. Jack covered her as she retreated, his shots precise and deliberate. We're getting boxed in, Reynolds growled, taking down another soldier. Not yet, Jack said, tossing a smoke grenade toward the doorway. The room filled with choking gray clouds, obscuring their attacker's vision. Move now, he shouted, grabbing Duke's collar and leading the charge toward a side exit. The team burst into the open air, the sound of alien shouts fading behind them. Diaz and Reynolds followed, their faces streaked with soot and sweat. Where to now? Diaz panted, clutching the device. Jack pointed toward the convoy. We head south. If we can power that thing up, we'll have a fighting chance. The drive to the nuclear plant was tense, every shadow a potential threat. Jack sat in the passenger seat, his grip tight on his shotgun. You think this thing's worth it? Diaz asked, her voice breaking the silence. Jack glanced at the device resting in the back. If it works, it could level the playing field. But if it doesn't, we're dead anyway, Reynolds finished grimly. They arrived at the plant as the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon. The towering cooling towers loomed like silent sentinels, their concrete surfaces cracked but imposing. This place gives me the creeps, Diaz said, stepping out of the truck. Join the club, Jack muttered, leading the way inside. The interior was a labyrinth of darkened corridors and abandoned control rooms. The team moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing. Stay sharp, Reynolds warned. If the aliens figured out the depot was a target, they might have hit this place too. Jack nodded, his shotgun at the ready. They reached the reactor room without incident, the faint hum of dormant machinery filling the air. There, Diaz said, pointing to a small console. That should control the power transfer. Jack approached, studying the controls. Looks like it'll work. Cover me while I get this running. As he worked, a distant noise reached their ears, the unmistakable sound of alien weapons firing. Contacts! Reynolds shouted, spinning toward the door. The aliens came fast, their glowing eyes cutting through the dim light. Diaz fired, her shots precise, while Reynolds laid down suppressive fire. Jack cursed under his breath, his fingers flying over the console. Almost there! Hurry up! Diaz yelled, ducking behind a terminal as a plasma bolt sizzled past. With a final keystroke, the reactor hummed to life, its lights flickering on. Jack grabbed the device and slammed it into the charging port. The symbols on its surface glowed faintly, then brightened. It's working! He shouted, pulling it free as the charge completed. Reynolds threw a grenade, forcing the aliens to scatter. Let's get the hell out of here! The team fought their way back to the convoy, the alien forces relentless. Jack fired his last shell as they piled into the truck, Diaz gunning the engine. As they sped away, the device in Jack's lap pulsed with energy, its potential undeniable. We've got a weapon, Jack said, his voice firm. Now let's use it to end this.